Hey guys, welcome to another game. I'm going to play a game here. Oh, game boarded. I've been trying to get a game to start. Chess.com seems to have no one wanting to play longer games. So I've gone to Lichess and at least I found a game a bit quicker. I want to hopefully place people who are higher rated than I am. Time control is going to be 30 minutes with an extra minute for each move. I am trying to play these longer games for a reason because it helps me obviously have time to think about my moves and hopefully play therefore a higher quality of chess, which is what I want to do. I'll tell you what I'll do is if I get a game, I will basically resume the recording. But for the moment, I will pause and get back to you if we actually have an opponent. All right, we got someone. Higher rated than me, 1939 on Lichess. And we have an e4, e5 opening. I'm just going to play standard and we'll see what happens. Italian opening. All right. Very good. Let's see what we can do with this. Okay. Play this in a very standard manner. All right. Okay, let's say knight f6. What if bishop g5? Now I know we're still in a theoretical position, but clearly I don't know the theory. So if that is played, there's not really any way for him to enhance the pressure on that knight. Not immediately anyway. So I could say castle. He could enhance the pressure by playing something like this with the intention of playing this. Could attack the bishop straight away and give up a pawn for the bishop. You know what? I could also play this in a much more solid way. Just defend this pawn and maybe then just quite simply go after his bishop. Not allow any tricky business with, pinning me. Why should I allow that? I don't understand why I would allow that, so I won't. Now again, the time control here is an extra minute for every time you play a move, so I shouldn't get into too much time pressure. I'm wondering, can he play the Evans Gambit here? Probably not. Actually, I mean, probably. I think that's how it would go. Something like that. It doesn't. And I could put a stop to it all with a5, also giving my bishop a little hiding hole. Alternatively, I can go after his bishop. If he wants to preserve the bishop, does it work to go to d5? I'd say not, because I can just expand in the center with tempo. Does he have any working sacrifices with the bishop? Again, I'd probably say not. But it might not be 100% clear. Might not be 100% clear. But I reckon that it's an unsound sacrifice to do this. If it was sound, he could have done it on the previous move. Like, even though that's a check, could I not just play king f1, and if he comes in with the queen, just develop my knight? And eventually, again, put the queen there and the rook here. I'd say that probably is correct. So I am actually just going to go after his bishop. Now, that is not possible because I take with check and basically then take the bishop. I probably should have been a bit more careful. Could have considered dropping the bishop back first as a prophylactic move, and still could consider that in future. But let's see what he does now. And what should he do? I mean, is he just going to let me capture the bishop and double his pawns like that, opening the position at the same time? I don't think so. I think he probably will say, you can take my bishop, but you need to give me an open A file for my rook in exchange for it. And I think I'm perfectly willing to do that. You know, I'm learning more and more that chess is both a game of small incremental steps and incremental advantages, and also a game of accurate and deep analysis. So we need to be accurate and deep in the analysis that we make. It can't really be generic in nature. Although there's, of course, a large temptation to do that because it's very difficult to be both deep and accurate. That's exactly what we're going to try and do. And I think that's basically about just really trying to play the best possible move and trying to think of what their best possible move is, and then following those lines. So we'll see how that goes. Part of that is wondering what the opponent would want to do. If I were him, I'd certainly be thinking about castling. I'd be thinking about playing moves like c4 or just c3 and then d4. Could he play d4 straight away? Comes with tempo on my bishop. So I could take and he could take back with his knight. Whereas if I move the bishop back immediately, then c4 I can basically ignore, because if he takes, I can take back, although then he could take with this knight. So c4 basically has to be taken anyway at this point. And then I could either leave my bishop where it is. So I don't think I need to move the bishop straight away now. He does have this open file for his rook. Yep, he wants to castle, sure. He probably wants to move this bishop, but only once I develop my knight. So like, say, knight f6, bishop g5, pinning the knight. Could attack the bishop then, and if he trades, I get my queen out here, and I think we're happy with that. If he just retreats the bishop, however, would I be interested in playing something like g5 to chase the bishop and allow something like this? I think that would be okay, because then I could play rook g8, hitting the bishop. And sure, he can defend the bishop in a variety of ways. But I can also then, well, let me think about that one. I think that makes it a little bit difficult for him to develop. Another thing I can do if I want to develop knight is come to e7, because that way bishop g5 can simply be met with f6. And the knight on e7 still supports the idea of a d5 push. The only problem with the d5 push immediately is that it seems to drop the e5 pawn. However, then I can take, and after take, I get to take the queen. And after he recaptures, I can take this pawn. After that, let's say he attacks my bishop. I could then actually drop back to here with a tempo on his knight. Also looking at the B2 pawn. The only issue with all of that is that the rook here and the knight here would combine against my pawn here. So I don't think I can play that pawn push until I have a rook on the F file to protect this pawn, and that would only be after I've castled. So I think I don't mind this idea, and then castles. But none of that really matters, because if I castle, he's likely to castle, and that protects his F pawn as well. There is also the idea of F5 immediately. F5 immediately is interesting for sure, gets rid of this pawn. Challenging his central E4 pawn. He can castle straight away though. If he castles, I suppose I can then play knight F6. He still has the idea of bishop G5. But then at least castles brings another defender to the rook. So is there anything much to fear there? I think we still have to be aware of this knight move with the plan of coming here. So in that case, I've got C6 to take control of the ideal landing square for the knight there. And I could move the queen out of the way and move the knight after that. So I don't mind the idea of F5. Don't mind the idea of F5. Okay, there is also A6, possibly A5 as well, but A6 would seem a bit more solid. Possibly just preparing this kind of a move so that the rook can move in the future as well, because at the moment, the rook may get stuck defending the pawn. Problem with A6 is that maybe it seems a bit slow to me. Maybe it seems a bit slow. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with this move, because it seems relatively active. And I'm not yet afraid of this move, because I can simply take. And if he takes back, well, I could take again if I wanted to. And we've got a bunch of simplifications on the board. After which I would say black is doing as well as white, I think. And if he takes, well, I simply develop my bishop, essentially with tempo. If he castles, I develop my knight, but in a way where the rook can defend it, which wasn't possible when there was a pawn on F7 because of the pawn interrupted with the rook. And ultimately, that rook will have an open file when I do castle. Thing is, when I castle, this diagonal here is very much open, but the fact that I've captured that light squared bishop that was there means that it's a little bit less easy for him to take advantage of that fact. So if I take here, is he going to try and attack my bishop? Possibly, but I can always just bring it back. I'm not afraid of that. So I think that's fine. I could always also return a bishop if I wished, but I don't think I would want to. I think I'd rather bring it home and maybe redirect it onto a long diagonal over here. And that would basically leave his knight on the side of the board. Of course, now I'm realizing that he cannot play that because my queen guards the h4 square. And he castles. Now, you know, with this kind of a development scheme, with my knight on f6, castles, and maybe a queen on e8, looking to potentially come to g6, you know, basically if I have a queen here, x-raying the king, then it really means that the h3 pawn is undefended and on pre. So in some respects, it would be nice to get the queen here as soon as possible. And the soonest possible way to do it would be to play queen f6 right now, with the idea of queen g6 on the following move. I play queen f6 immediately. There's a couple possible responses. One is that he could develop his bishop with a tempo on my queen. When I step to the side, the bishop is actually defended, but I am threatening to attack the bishop, forcing it to move somewhere. And after it moves, then capturing the bishop, capturing the pawn. So just to show this variation, what else could he do here? Well, I feel that bishop would be rather trapped because basically anywhere it goes, it will basically lead to a scenario where I can take that pawn. If he moves the knight, I think that's essentially a similar idea and a similar outcome, where I'm going to be able to force that knight to move away again. And when it does, take the pawn. So if I do play this queen f6 idea, I'm also preparing then to castle long, which is very interesting. Very, very interesting. So queen f6, let's say knight c3, preparing a move like knight d5. Queen f6, knight c3, queen g6. Knight d5, bishop takes. There's no time for a move. Well, there is actually time for this move because this move comes with check. But after this move, and say king d7, attacking the knight and also threatening mate, I'd say black is looking very, very strong. This is quite unusual, but I quite like the idea. Now, what else can he do? Let's say he develops the knight this way. Queen g6. I don't really see the big idea. Queen f6, what if he just goes for an attack on my bishop? I'd say even then, the queen to g6 works because it defends the bishop. One issue perhaps with, say, queen f6, and then let's say this knight move, queen g6. One big issue is that then he can put his knight on to h4, attacking both the queen and the bishop. Then there's no time to take the pawn because queen hangs. So really we need to bring the h4 square under control. One way to do that would be to play h4 and then h5. Because with the pawn on h5, it would be protected by a rook. And it's not so much about protecting the pawn as it is about giving the rook access to that square, visibility to that square. Another benefit potentially of playing this move is that if we go for this plan of queen f6 and castles long, we'll have a situation where castles on opposite sides of the board. And the general prescription there, when you've got castling on opposite sides, is to get a pawn storm going against the opponent's king. So h4 would be an appropriate foreshadowing of a castles long opposite sides castling game, being aware that he does have an open file here. So it's a bit of give and take. Still, it's defended by my bishop for the time being. A6 can also always be played. So let's see what he can do in response to, say, h4, which also gives another square for my bishop. It also defends against ideas of g4, because then I can simply take. If he does play this knight move, well, he still can't, because the bishop does a great job there. Okay, so there are those things, but I've just realized something else as well, and I want to look into it. After something along these lines, if the knight does come here, it does allow for a check. Does that actually help in any way, though, after he takes with the rook? After he takes with the rook, I don't believe it actually helps. So h4, what can he do here? Basically, h4 is very committal, very, very committal. It also very much weakens the g5 square, where that bishop might one day appear. And it kind of takes away, you know, that might be a good refutation of h4. Maybe a good refutation of h4. It's also possible for me right now not to play that move exactly. Yeah, okay, so it is a little bit difficult. How else can I take this square under control? Well, maybe like knight e7 and then knight g6. Problem with that is g6 is the square I wanted my queen on. So, okay, we're burning some time, but we're trying to think accurately and deeply. Bishop here is loose. Can't be attacked because it's defended by the queen. Maybe we could play something like queen c7 and look for a sacrifice along these lines in future. Maybe we can control h4 by first playing h6 and then g5. g5 being the pawn to control h4. The benefit of that is the pawn here will always defend the g5 square from invasion by his rook, by his knight or bishop. It's not as committal of a move, gives a square for the bishop to get to. And, you know, long term, we can get another rook down here. I quite like that as a long-term idea. But if we're going to do that, I don't think there's any need to put the queen potentially on g6. Like, yes, maybe that's where the queen will go, but also maybe the queen might want to go on to g7 or just g8. You know, who knows? But in all of those plans, I think I do want to castle long. And I sort of need to be aware that he might want to put a rook or a queen onto the e file and play a move like d4, forcing me to move the bishop away, then capturing a couple times. Probably something to be careful of as we proceed. If I try and attack that knight right away, then he can play some sort of a move along those lines. Play something like this, but then he takes, and I have not really succeeded in my tasks. So this move seems okay. This move possibly even better, to the extent that it invites this. Well, then I get to play h6 with tempo. It also gives me the opportunity to castle either way. So after a long think, I will actually go with knight f6. I'm not going to go with this queen f6 idea because I don't see a way to really continue it. Perhaps I'll go a queen to the 7th rank, looking to get over to the G file later on with the support of rooks. Although maybe I'm just going to castle over here as per the initial plan. So let's see what he's going to do now. I guess he could play something like d4 straight away, and after I take, he could check and force me to move my king to one of these squares. I guess force is possibly a strong word there. I mean, obviously I wouldn't want to block with my queen and give him a queen for a rook. And obviously I wouldn't want to block with my bishop and give him a bishop for free. But maybe I could block with my knight, given that this pawn might have come forward and been traded in order for this line to actually occur. So say he pushes the pawn and I take, then check. Then let's say knight over to the E file. Then he could play something like this, attacking my frozen knight. Problem with that is I could take. But maybe you could put the knight here so that he'd have 2 attackers against my knight, which is only defended once. I could defend it again, I suppose. He can take this pawn. Seems very complicated. Also, if he takes, I could take with my bishop. Then the problem is he takes bishop, and when I take back, he wins his pawn back. Well, not wins his pawn back, but wins a pawn. If he plays this move, can I just ignore it? Well, not really, because again, he's going to win a pawn after d takes e. D takes e. Queen takes. Rook takes. I suppose if knight takes, there is bishop takes. With a tempo on this pawn. Also possibly with the idea of, okay, so that could work. That could work. So if he plays bishop g5, okay, he's made his move. Opposing my bishop, that's probably a nice move. Opposing my bishop, if I take, he gets to have a nice pawn structure and also open up his own rook along the f file. If I don't take, well, then he can take, and we've sort of equalized the pawn structure. I oppose his rook. That seems like it could well be fine for me. That could well be fine for me. Because if I take, as well as him having a nice central pawn structure and open file here, it also means I lose a defender of this potentially tender square. So, maybe a move like this does make sense, and just say, look, you can have it if you want, but it's just going to lead to trades. And that's going to make it harder for you to win, and more likely that we possibly end up with a draw. And I'm okay with that. Particularly since I would be the one who owns the A file then. I don't think I just want to allow him to take and ruin my pawn structure. Also losing a pawn. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to spend forever on that particular move. It would also be possible to take with the C pawn here. But I don't think that's what I want to do. I think I'll take toward the center. And if we have a rook trade, that's fine. Still ready to castle this way. That's fine. Pre-move this. And I think my position is solid. 12 moves in. I'm ready to castle. We've got essentially a bishop and a knight versus two knights in otherwise quite a symmetrical position, where I have a semi-open f-file for my rook and possibly slightly better pawns in terms of their centralization. So I've got to say, on the whole, I quite like my position. Now, depending on what he does now, it might be a risk. Maybe I can play something like Queen A2 or Queen A1. Because, yeah, I feel like I have a few strategic advantages. One of them potentially is the bishop. Okay. One of them is the fact that I am the owner of the A file and that I have the semi-open F file as well. So clearly I can't play Queen A1, but I also can't play Queen A2 anymore. So that was probably nice. He may wish to play a move like this or this, both of which can be stopped with the C pawn. And that could be just a nice prophylactic move potentially, but then knight A4 puts pressure on this pawn. And if I play B5, he still has access to the B6 square forevermore. Whereas I could also just drop my bishop back to D7 to take that square under control. Still allows him to continue sort of developing. Maybe here I should just castle. I mean, what's the big deal of letting him? What's the big deal of letting him have access to this square? I mean, the whole big deal is that he's attacking the C7 pawn. But there, I could play a move like knight D5. Knight D5 would defend that square, that pawn. Problem is my knight could be attacked. And that wouldn't be ideal. Also, if I let him have this square, I could then play this move, and if he takes the pawn, I take this pawn. I feel like he's better off there because this pawn is doing a very good job of holding together, like it's the base of this chain. It's also the base of this chain, if you want to think about it that way. So this is a pretty important looking pawn. Maybe my pawn structure would look better like this. So maybe this is an idea. And if he gets his knight here, maybe I just give this pawn away. Or otherwise defend it like this with a very solid knight. And just say your knight's not doing much over there because you have no way to gain access to my knight. The rest of my position is really quite solid. My knight would also be defending this pawn, so maybe it can get overloaded in certain circumstances. Perhaps my queen's not doing enough. Maybe my queen should have a role in taking control of this square from the knight. In that scenario, knight A4 doesn't really scare me much at all. I just have a queen on a nice diagonal in that scenario. So that looks nice. I mean, if he offers a queen trade, I can always give him a queen trade. But just taking control of this square seems like a nice idea, potentially. Do I want my queen to be doing that? Maybe not. My bishop's maybe not doing a whole lot here, so maybe this is a better move for the bishop to do and end up with my bishop on a longer diagonal. But is my position then becoming quite passive? So let's say castle, I play this. I mean, he plays that. I could then play knight E1 even. I could play knight E1 to defend this. And on the following move, I could bring a queen in, but then he gets to develop, kind of really attend to his pawn structure here. And not sure how that makes me, how happy I am about all of that. So it is difficult now. This could be a move as well. but I feel this gives the queen a bit more scope. A little bit more scope. Yeah. So what does he do with queen a5? Something along these lines. Castles. Maybe the immediate d4. Yeah, okay. Maybe I just have to accept a passive position here because, I mean, I can certainly defend this. I think that's what I'm going to do. Because I don't really like the idea of wasting time with my queen, giving him still other options anyway. I think I'm better off, let's get castled, and if we need to reroute some pieces to defensive positions temporarily, we can do that. You know, maybe this move's not too bad in order to defend here. I just don't want to be creating weaknesses unnecessarily. Because otherwise I think my position, like I say, is good. I do own the A file. I've now got a rook on the semi-open F file. My pawn structure, while, you know, of course there's always some certain vulnerabilities, at the moment, I think things are all right. Even if he does get his knight here, I've got so many defensive resources there, one of which is rook f7. One problem with rook f7 is potentially knight g5, knocking my rook off the open file. So maybe for that reason, I would prefer to defend c7 with the knight. And that kind of does the job. That really does the job. At least for the time being. At least I feel here I have the resources to deal with what he's going to throw at me, whatever that may be. Again, with every move I make, I get an extra minute of time. So I know I'm low on time, but an extra minute with every move should mean if we ever have like 2 or 3 captures, that's 2 or 3 minutes that gets added. So I think I've decided that in response to this move, I'm going to play this. I think. Rather than playing something like this and allowing these kinds of trades. although those could have a place. I think I prefer this. You know, maybe the A file is not so important. Maybe it's not so important. Maybe my queen is better, you know, over here or something. That way with my rook here, I could, if I wanted to play something like this, to give extra protection. And with my queen here and the knight no longer there, I at least take control of this guy. Maybe I still want to play h6 at some point. Because if I play h6, then I can safely play rook f7. And I can also safely drop my bishop back if I wish. So, okay, he's put his rook onto a file that he expects will become open, probably after a move like d4. And, you know, say takes, bishop moves, rook e7. That's the kind of thing we don't want to allow. If he plays something like that, I guess I can play this and just attack that knight. Potentially. Yeah, it could also be an idea behind queen c8. And in response to something like this, I can just take, he takes, I take, and claim to have an attack against his king going. What could he do there? Not so sure. Could also play this now just to take that square away from his knight. If something like this is played, then play this. And if he takes, takes, boom, hitting his rook. There's not enough there, I don't believe. I don't believe in that for myself. Still, maybe I should just try and get my queen here. Like, let's say a move like queen e8, which really encourages him to play d4. And then queen g6, but he still has this defensive move. He still has it. So it'd be great if I could knock this guy out of the way. And I almost could, like this, but not quite, because with my queen on e8, I'm not threatening to take the knight. You know, but maybe like queen c8, and if he plays d4, then I could play e4, and then I am threatening to take the knight. So that knight would have to move somewhere. Let's say here. Then he has 1, 2, 3 attackers. And it's true I've only got 2 defenders. I can bring a 3rd defender in. It looks like I'm just trying to defend, when actually it might be a ruse and I'm trying to just get to queen g6. So let's say he brings another attacker. Then I play queen g6. Let's say he uses one of the knights to capture. Then I take this pawn. I mean, he can defend. It's super complicated, all of that. I'm not obligated to play queen c8 to make that plan happen. I basically have a free move right now and wait for him to play this before I go for the e5 queen e8, queen g6 idea. So what would I like to do in that meantime?
Thankfully. Nada, good.
To je moja žena. All right. So in that case, what would I like to do? Which piece would I like to move? I might like to move the knight, frankly speaking. Maybe, although it's still somewhat necessary. Why don't I use that free move to do this, this move I was thinking of before? Maybe. Maybe I want to play c6. Maybe I want to play rook to the d file. Or to the e file. Or, I mean, what else? Maybe queen c8. Maybe I do like queen c8 for the potential of this sacrifice, but is it sound? I guess my threat there is to play knight g4, where I'm threatening check and then mate, but in that case, with the knight here, you can defend against the mate threat with something like this, so then after check, there's no mate, given that that defends. But I guess then I would have check here. And bringing the rook up certainly looks somewhat dangerous for him. Brings an idea to the game. Brings an idea to the game. But I'm just going to go with this h6 idea. Gives both my pieces, or quite a few of my pieces, get a little hiding hole. And it also permits me to put the rook here in addition to this if I just want to go back to that very passive idea. It might bring forth ideas like this in the future. And it's somewhat non-committal at this stage. Now, I kind of am expecting either the knight move or d4. So if d4, I think I'm going to try and displace the knight. Might ultimately cost me a pawn if he captures the knight. That's the thing. Like, if I just take, he could take with the knight, trying to attack my bishop. In fact, he may possibly well do that. I can bring the bishop back here. Then he can play something like this. I think there everything's quite all right. Whereas this, the more forcing line, the knight has to go somewhere. If it comes here, I can afford to retreat the bishop. Although then he gets this square for his knight. With a tempo on this rook. That might become a very annoying knight. So maybe in that case, I would be better retreating this way. Which is kind of contrary to what my whole plan has been. But at least the pawn is still defended. And if he were to bring in another attacker on the pawn, I could very well bring another defender, or I could attack his knight. Forcing that knight to move again And in fact, that knight looks like it would be trapped. In that example. My king would be very open. So let's say he says, okay, fine. I'm going to take the pawn. We take the knight. Then what does he do? Takes knight. I take knight. I don't see what he does. Gives a check. I have to defend my knight. He gives another check. I again defend my knight. He picks up this pawn. Yeah, it looks really scary and getting discombobulatingly complicated. So again, maybe I should just play something that's very solid. And try to hunker down for a draw. Okay, he's going for some trades. Give me the opportunity to trade queens, which forces him to recapture with the rook, but gives him ownership of this file. Okay. And then the game goes on. So let's say take, and then he takes back. Then I come here, preventing this knight move. If he wants to come, infiltrating here, well, I've got this move. And everything there is pretty much beautiful. If he plays that, the idea of playing this and takes. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to give him ownership of that file. In fact, fuck you, you're not having my file. What I might do is this move anyway. Maybe I'll just do this move anyway. Or for that matter, this move, since he hasn't played this. If he does then play this, then I've got this move, not. But now that his queen's, maybe further away from his king, maybe I prefer this queen c8 move now, because now if takes, I'm immediately attacking this knight. The queen's no longer there to defend. So what if this? It's probably all right. Don't necessarily want to let him infiltrate though. If I were to move my knight, then I could get my rook out. Still he's going to have that move. So what if this g5 idea, massively opening the position of my king? What else have I got? Well, maybe I'll just play this now. If he comes here, attacking this guy, I can just attack him, and if he attacks my queen, then I could either give him a trade. Which I don't really want to do still. Again, also, if this move, and he comes here attacking this guy, then there's this to defend that guy. feel like that's okay. So I want to do this. Probably not. Like, why should I? It's not always easy to know what to do. Can I do this? Because if he takes, I can take, and he can take. So if I do this, it's basically sacrificing a pawn. Yeah, don't have a lot of time on the clock either. Could just move my king. So I'm thinking queen c8, maybe c6, maybe knight d7. That's kind of what I'm thinking of, maybe bishop d7. I'm gonna go with queen c8 because I can always repeat the position with nothing lost as far as I can tell. In the meantime, I'm handing him the rope and give him a chance to hang himself. So let's see what he does. I still think this could be a good idea, but now my queen does defend it. And I can defend with the rook, the knight. I can chase him away in various options. So again, I think my position's very solid. And if he doesn't come up with something creative, we might get a draw through repetition. Which at this point would basically be by agreement. That we've both basically judged the position to be a draw. But no, he's moving his king. That's a nice move, giving extra support to this pawn. I could still give a check, sacking a piece. And then I've got a bishop and a rook attacking this knight. He can bring extra defense back to the knight. Interestingly, I could probably still go for this. If he takes, then check, and he takes, and I take. Again, this guy's then under attack, and I'm going to win it. And if he moves it away somewhere, anywhere, then I get this check in, which is all but mate. So let's see. I take the pawn. You've got two options. One of them is you can take with the pawn here. If you do that, I've got check. And if you take, then I can take the pawn. And, you know, even if you come somewhere like this, let's say, then I can take the knight. Or I can give it check. I think it's at least a draw there, funnily enough, if you take with the pawn. Check. If you move, you know, back somewhere, however, then I say take the knight, and if you take my knight, then check, check. Not convinced of it, but boy, it's kind of close. It's kind of very close. What about this move? Giving you a bit more rope. Or for that matter, this move. Maybe this move. Not long on the clock. if he wants to take it, actually has to be with the pawn. Then there's check. Say he moves away. That would be a disaster because of this. So if I take, he has to take with the pawn. Then there's check. And he has to move. Well, if he takes, then I take with the queen. And after, let's say something like this, I take the knight. And I don't think it really quite works. Fair enough. Maybe I'm just gonna, not long on the clock. Let me give the rope back to him. I can always repeat. But now I've sort of taken this square under control for the time being. You know, maybe if he plays something like this, then that would really tempt me then to really go for this. Let's just see what he does, because I do think the position is very equal. That's my assessment. And that as long as I stay solid, I don't see how he makes progress, at least in any kind of way that's going to demolish my position. Maybe very slowly, especially given that I've got less time than him now, but I do get a minute for every move that we make. Now, if he attacks my bishop, I'll probably just keep it here. Then he can attack my rook, though. And I can get out of trouble. And like, what does he do then? My position is still very solid. And I really don't see any kind of big troubles there. Maybe he could sack the knight for 2 pawns. But I believe that would help me. Ultimately, my king can go to h7. So not all that worried about this move at all. It also maybe prepares some knight discoveries. Also, I could just play this move as well. Or this. No, sorry, not that. Possibly I could go for this still. And after he takes, and we go check, yeah, man, that could even be something to consider. Take, he takes, check, let's say he takes, check. Say he comes here. I don't think we quite have enough. I don't think we quite have enough for that sacrifice to work. Could be wrong. Analysis at the end with a computer will probably show. But I do think it's a pretty even game. Again, he's going for this queen trade. And again, I do not have to oblige him. I could just play c4 here. I could play this, and if he plays that, I can play this. But now, at least if I take, it sort of doesn't matter so much how he recaptures. Position still simplifies a bit. I can also play this if I want. What else? What's weak in his position? Maybe I play something like this even. So you want to take, that's fine. We go into this kind of a pawn structure. That could be good. Also just pins his knight down, so if he moves, I take the pawn over here. So I have to move pretty quickly. That's what I'm going to do. If he takes, I'll take back, and I'm happy enough with that pawn structure. I think it's very solid. Again, I have ample ways to defend this pawn. Of course, with my queen here, I no longer have ideas about this sacrifice, but I don't think they were working as long as his king was well positioned. But I am happy if he wants to trade now. Okay, the position simplifies some more. Then he might take control of this file. And that is an important point. But all he can ever really do on that file is infiltrate to the 7th rank and attack the pawn that's going to be here. But I can always defend that pawn with at least 2 pieces. And it looks like that's what he's going to do. So if he comes here, I'm likely to play my rook here to defend this somewhat weak pawn, and I don't see any way for him to ever actually attack the pawn. Because to do so, he would need a knight here or here. Maybe he can get there in the future. But at least for the moment, my pawns are doing a lot. So if he takes the open file, I can't contest that file, but I can at least just do this, or maybe just activate my king to some extent, maybe even play g5 at that point. Maybe not, maybe activate my king. And if he comes to the 7th rank, defend. You can attack my bishop then, but my bishop can drop. Improve his knight, but then I take, he takes, and I can take in a way that where if he takes, I can take here. Yeah, interesting position, but I think I'm pretty solid. I think it's probably a draw, and I could almost ask him if he would accept a draw at this point, but I'll play for the sake of practice. Got time, so I might as well. Okay, is there anything else going on in this position? If he goes for something like this right now, then honestly, I'd consider just taking that file up here myself. If he takes, take back, maybe. Or maybe I would take, and then if he takes there, drop. Or drop, not sure. And that's exactly what he does do. Interestingly, I could also just put the knight over here. If he attacks it, I can come here, attack the pawn. That's an interesting decision actually from him. I could also just give up the bishop. He would have to take back with the pawn. And that I quite like for me. He certainly doesn't want to take back with the rook because he loses an exchange. And if he takes back with the pawn, then I can take ownership of this file, and his rook is, has to stay there in defense. I'm actually going to do that. I don't have a lot of time to think about the move, but I'm going to go for that. Slightly surprising to give the bishop up, but I think it works. Why not take the file and just say, what are you going to do about it? You're going to move your knight somewhere? Maybe. Maybe, but what is your knight going to do there? Could move my knight as well. I could just move my knight, but then he gets to take the file. I guess I then come here. If he comes here, I've always got this defensive move. I'm looking at this pawn. So like if I come here, he comes here, I come here, I could even let him get in here. And maybe take the pawn. He takes pawn, I take pawn, he takes pawn, I don't really want to allow that, but I could do this. He comes here, I come here, he comes here, and I defend. And then this pawn is under attack. And the only way for him to defend it is like this, as far as I can tell. The problem with that is I can then take a pawn with tempo against the knight. So I quite like that. And it also restricts his knight from moving anywhere because it immediately puts it under a pin. So the most dangerous move I can see is that he takes the file. Then I come here. If he just kicks me away, thanks for the pawn. And I can always return to this square after I defend. So I think I do like that. Whereas if I just take the file here, okay, there's not much he can do. Maybe nothing he can do other than like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because I don't want him to reroute the knight to this stronger square. And by doing this, at least his knight is currently pinned. He might be able to like play something like this and put the king here and then reroute the knight. But in the meantime, I think this is a nice little purchase of time. Like if he plays something like this, then I've got this. Well, not necessarily. Still think things are solid, but we are kind of in an end game almost. Some would call this an end game, minor pieces and rooks. Some would maybe call it a queenless middle game still, I'm not sure, but it definitely seems very even. I don't think I'm any worse here. And I don't think there's any disadvantage to me in giving him this file. Let's go through my plan again. He comes here, I'm going to come here. Any infiltration here can just be met like this. Or, for that matter, with takes. He takes, he takes. No, not that, but just with first coming here. Defending the pawn, maintaining the attack here, which would have to be defended like so. Which then allows me to take here with tempo against the knight. So I really like that. So I think he should play something like this, but he can't because I take the knight. So should he bring his king here? Well, maybe, but what are you doing? What are you doing with your king? I can still just come here immediately if I wish, and he can kick me away. That's what he does do. That is what he does do. So I can bring my rook here. That allows him to move the knight. Then I can also move my knight to either square. Okay, he's getting active, which is a very nice idea. Maybe I do this, and that prevents him from rerouting the knight that way, at least. Which is probably an okay move. What else have I got? I could just take the file now and say, don't care if you get your knight there because it's still not going to do anything to me, which is kind of true, at least in the short term. And once I take that file, I could come here, force him to defend that way. That could be an option. Yeah. Doesn't seem like my rook's doing a lot here anymore. And this is very committal. Not sure I want to do that. So I could do this knight move first. All right. Do the rook move. Let's take the file. and say, I don't care if you get your knight here because everything's defended. Except this square, but I can just bring my king up at that moment. I think everything's still solid. Okay, rerouting his knight, wants to play a move like f4, but he is giving me the opportunity to play rook a2. Play rook a2. Let's play rook a2. I can always return the rook if I want to the 8th rank. I'm not necessarily afraid of something like this. I don't see why I should be, just leaves him with an isolated pawn. An isolated pawn which could be prone to attack. Also like that, if this move ever happens and he tries to ward off my knight, then it gives my rook the a4 square, potentially. I still just think I'm basically in a drawn position. And honestly, against a guy, even though it's light chess, where ratings are generally a little bit higher than chess.com, I'll draw with someone rated 1939, happily, no matter where that rating comes from. And most importantly, I think I've played a solid game of chess. I don't think I've missed any winning opportunities. Guess we'll see. We'll see, I suppose, what's going to happen here. He does, I think, have to defend the pawn. I don't think it's enough to do it with the knight, because after a move like this, I guess that knight can come here and counterattack this pawn. It's like I take, he takes this pawn. But okay, don't have to think about it. He's decided how he wants to do that. Now there's this, if I want it. There's also this. I get the knight. I want my knight here, don't I? In an ideal world. That's the square for my knight. Sort of. Do I want to play this move now? What is he going to do with his knight? At least that lets me get my knight somewhere. Not sure what I want to do. Maybe I'll get my king happening. If I let his knight come here. Probably doesn't matter that much. Probably doesn't matter that much. Or do I just strangle his knight this way? For the time being. Ooh, I like this move, but it's possibly dangerous. If he does this, my idea is to come here. Double attacking this pawn. Then if he attacks my knight, I've got this attacking the rook. Okay, interesting. Okay. Now I'm just going to come here because that looks like a great square for my knight. As does this. My rook's still safe. I don't have to go pawn hunting. My pawns are all still very safe. And now the knight's really doing a great job defending this square. and all the pawns are just looking healthy. This is the only one that could maybe become vulnerable. If he got his knight here, how's he going to do that? I guess from here or here. How's he going to get to those squares? Basically what I'm trying to say is it's going to be a long journey for him to try and get a knight there. And even if he does, I can play this. Everything's defended. I can bring my king here. I'm going to offer him a draw. Soon. I'll play a few more moves. We'll see where this goes. I don't dislike my position at all. I think I've got a good position. Maybe not enough to win, but not too bad. Not too bad at all. Solid. King activity sort of should matter now. That pawn can't move at the moment. If I could attack this pawn somehow, like what if can I come here with a plan of coming here? I don't see why not. Gets a bit more time on the clock, so I'm threatening this move. Now he can then defend, but again, I can kick him away. He can then attack this guy. I can push that guy up if I like. And if I want, I can always return. There's also here check, and then taking this pawn if he doesn't move the knight. So like say he did something like this, there's check and take the pawn, which would be beautiful. Or like if he moves this pawn, really, that's potentially an idea in a lot of cases. I'd say the position is probably still a draw, but I'm on the winning side of the draw, if you know what I mean. Like it's probably like negative 0.5 or something. So, I mean, look at my knight compared to his, look at my rook compared to his. He's got a more active king, but yeah, I kind of like my position very much, even though I think it probably objectively is a draw. And I like that this is, potentially little sneaky ideas of giving check and then coming here. Other ideas of coming here with a double attack on the pawn, attacking the knight. If the knight attacks this pawn, just coming here. And how do you defend the pawn? I say you can't. You can't. So I think maybe I'm doing better than a draw in this position. Maybe I've given him enough rope that his position might be starting to tighten, which might be why he's now starting to spend a bit of time on this move. I probably do want to get some king activity happening, but let's see what happens, because he's going to have to deal with some potential threats here. Again, the whole idea of doing a check here, if I'm given a chance, is that this pawn is pinned to the knight. So like after the check and he moves the king somewhere, then I can take this pawn because the pawn's not actually defended. I can take, and if he takes back, I win the knight. If I take as well, I'm hitting the rook. So one thing he could do there is maybe move the rook here to counterattack my knight. And if my knight moves away, then he can win this pawn. But even after that, I take this with check. Well, not with check, but with the tempo on the knight. And then I can come here with a tempo on my rook. So maybe it's not as simple as what I first thought. Take, because of this move, because of rook c1. But after rook c1, I take pawn. He then attacks my rook. Guess I have this then, defending my knight. Yeah, I think that checks out. then attack my rook again. But I can move out of the way. Anyway, we'll see what he plays, but it's definitely something I'm going to have a little bit of time to consider. Oh, wow. That looks like it could be a mistake because now I get check and I'm also attacking the pawn. So after check, let's say he attacks my knight. Can I take the pawn? Maybe, or maybe my knight's going to start to get trapped. But what I could maybe do is take the pawn, and if he takes back, check, he comes here, take. Sort of looks like my knight could end up trapped in that scenario. Really interestingly. Really very interesting moves. Very interesting move. I can give check anyway. If he comes here, I can just come back. I'm going to do that. And of course, like if he moves away somewhere, then I may well take. And if he moves here, that gives me enough time to retreat successfully. So I think he should come here or here. If he comes here, then I can repeat. And I still would take a draw. I still would take a draw. We'll check with the computer later whether I had a winning opportunity there, but I didn't believe, I'm pretty sure my knight would have got trapped. Regardless, this still allows the opportunity to take if I want. But I've got to be very careful. And he comes here. So I don't believe I can take, because he just takes my knight. I also don't believe I can take here, because I have no way to free my knight up after that. I don't think anyway. Can he take my knight though? I don't know if he can take my knight. Don't know if he can take my knight. What would he do? Can he move away? I'm just saying my knight is useless now. I don't know. Can I take that? Is that a winning opportunity? Certainly he wouldn't be able to capture it back. It's just that my knight becomes trapped. My rook also becomes immobile in defending that. It gives his knight basically free reign. I don't want to do that. There's only a minute on the clock, so I'm just going to return that. I'm going to accept that I'm not pushing for a win in that. You can't really do this because I'm just going to take, I think. Or does that also seem to trap my knight a little bit? Very interesting. My knight can always come back. Just don't want to let my knight get trapped. That's what it comes down to. And my knight's still better than his. My rook's still better than his. Don't need to go and hang myself in the pursuit of pushing too hard for a win, ending up losing. Which, as we saw in Game 6 of the World Championship match recently, Nepo probably pushed a bit too hard for the win. And ended up with loss. Of course, he needed to win. Can't blame him for that. I don't need to win this. I can accept the draw. So that was an interesting moment. I am now threatening this pawn. And he can't defend it with the rook because he drops this pawn. There's no way to defend it with the knight. And I don't think he can just move it out of the way because then this pawn falls, I believe. Unless he moves it here. But even then I take. So I think what he needs to do is return the king to where it was and give me another chance to calculate. Take, take, check, he comes here or here, and I take. I would think that was the better place for him to be, covering all my knight's escape squares, including d1. Do I have any other ideas here? Can I break with something like d5? Idea being if he takes, I take back. I guess I could. Ultimately, I could also, if he takes, take with my knight, try and attack the pawn that way. Whew, I might have a slight edge, but do I push hard for a win? I could do this move again. I will for the moment. Let's just see what he does. Do I try and take the pawn? He can't come this way because I just take and then take, so that's for sure. So if I take the pawn, what else can he do? Can he come out here? Well, I guess, yeah, he can. So he's offering a repetition. I could come here as well. It's another possibility. But there's nothing much happening there either. He's the one that's passive and just defending everything, but he's solid. So unless I want to go for something else big here, like d5, then it's going to be a draw essentially from threefold repetition. Yeah, so do I want to claim a draw? I've got 2 minutes to think about it. Again, this little tactic unfortunately doesn't work. Because my knight gets trapped. There is check. And taking this pawn. And then maybe just going into an endgame. Ooh. I'm going to claim the draw. Threefold repetition. Let's have a look just real quickly to see if that was actually winning for me. I have a feeling it may have been. So what does the computer say in terms of the analysis at this point? Yeah, black is actually in a winning position here. Black's in a winning position, just needed to get some king activity happening. Or even just basically continue improving my position and ask white what they're going to do. Because my pieces are so good, like what are your pieces going to do? I don't need to go win material, but I can just improve. So to go back to about move 15, I remember thinking that was about a draw, and it is. Yeah, giving up the bishop here was a nice move. Yep, and I had the edge. I think this was a nice game. Even though I accepted a draw, through threefold repetition in a winning position against a high-rated opponent to be on the winning side of a draw, pretty satisfied. So let's see how the computer would have finished this off. He's got to do something. He doesn't want to weaken his position in any great way. Says I can go for this, maybe just to build some time. Get my king active, that seems more natural to me than what feels like a risky b5. I guess the idea of b5 is to prevent c4. He's going to get his knight here. Can't really stop that. All right. And we're just going to push on. And now we're going to take here. Yeah, I mean, if I was starting fresh, if I could start the game completely fresh in this position, then rather than repeating 3 times, if I had a fresh brain and everything, maybe I would start a game here and push for a win. That'd be a very nice exercise. But as it is, threefold repetition, winning side of a draw against a high-rated opponent, I'll take it. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.